Hello, my name is Pat Patton, and thank you for joining us today. Have you ever read something and wondered, how did the writer come up with such a terrific idea? Or maybe you thought to yourself, I wish I could write, but I don't have a clue how to begin. Our goal with this program is to explore the deep waters of creativity and to expose the answers to those elusive questions. To do that, we've interviewed some of the most exciting writers in America today, and we hope what they have to share about their writing process will inspire you to put your ideas in writing. Hello, and welcome to Ideas in Writing. Our guest today is Deanna Nikaido, author of Vibrating with Silence, a book of poetry. Deanna, welcome to the show, and thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Pat.
Oh, you're welcome. This is wonderful poetry. Now, in it, where did you come up with the inspiration for this book, with Vibrating with Silence?
I guess the nature of the book is, sound is a vibration. So the poems are, kind of intonating sound and silence. That's the place that I write from.
That's the place that you write from. Now, you were telling me before that you started writing as a child. Is that right?
I did, as a teenager.
As a teenager. So can you tell me what led you to take up writing?
I think it's just something, as a teenager, there's this angst that everybody goes through. And for me, it's love. I think it's love for pretty much everybody. And you need to express yourself because it's just such a time of questioning and uncertainty. So I just started writing, and I haven't stopped ever since.
So what was there a sort of trigger that actually got you started?
Mostly the need to write, but I think the way that I write is it's not something that I wait to come up with inspiration. It's always been something more of a listening process, and it's kind of like there's this stream of consciousness that's continually going on inside of you. And depending on how well you listen and can interpret what's going on, that's kind of how the poems show up for me.
Is it? Would you like to read one of your poems for us?
I could do
Just
that.
pick one. There you go. I know you have your favorite. You have your favorite, but I think it's important that people hear what your poetry is like.
Yeah, this one actually is it's based on sound and came from two premises. One is from a song I heard by a group called Zero Church, and what it was an interview with Matthew Shepard's mother after his murder. And there was a stanza in the poem that went, once a sound is made, you can't catch it, you can't call it back, you can't change it, and you can't erase it. It goes forever and forever out into the universe. And the second is that there's no such thing as solid matter. So there's no edges to anything. Everything is kind of continuous. So this is a poem that's called Continuing. How far does the sound of one bird's open-ended warble reach if nothing is solid and the air is filled with continuing? If every cell is a tilted domino leaning into the next, then I am the last word of your conversation and the beginning of your next. If memory were long enough to fill this presence, if the same invisible verb that whispers bloom to the rose and dawn to my eyes were a noun I could touch, if this ink from my pen is the breath of a child in his mother's love, then language is feeling, and words are hollow cups poured and pouring. And this bottomless fear, the one that fits inside every separation, cannot cap this sky. Still, I count stars like breadcrumbs across every darkness, feeling the pressure of grace. Outgrowing limitation, my future already turning inside the heart, of one who holds me close, the one whose name secretly frames forever, the one who balances the clock I break between sunrise and sunset. Every thread of distinction between you and I is a safety net. Undissolved sugar at the bottom of a drink, we stir and stir, continuing like breath through sleep in a country the body has no geography for. This glass moment slipping from outline, this full fragrant prayer exhaled in one night's glory, is a beheaded love, carried everywhere the wind blows. How can we breathe this miracle and remain ordinary? Hold ourselves in a state of unscented captivity, drown in the shallow end of questions we can't seem to touch the bottom of.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Now, that's quite long. Were you a teenager when you wrote that?
No, I was not
So
a teenager.
this is more of
a recent poem.
A recent poem. Wow, I love the bit about the sugar melted in the undissolved sugar in the bottom of the cup. It's images like that which make poetry so beautiful and lyrical. I think that's fantastic. Now, is poetry your main form of writing, or do you write essays or short stories or anything like that?
Poetry.
Poetry
it's
is
definitely
it.
Poetry.
Poetry is it.
Yes.
And when you started writing poetry as a teenager, how did you feel that the imagery came to you? In other words, were you picking up on something that you saw or heard, or was it more of a feeling that you were trying to write about? What sort of inspired you as a child, or I'm sorry, as a teenager to start this?
Definitely feeling. You know, I hear things like I feel things.
Right.
Is kind of how it comes to me, and it's meditative. It's the odd thing is when I used to write as a teenager, I literally would start to fall asleep, which I couldn't explain at the time until I got to be much older and I consciously picked up meditation and realized that that's probably where I was going to and tapping into. And I do meditate. I've meditated for quite a few years, and I couple that with writing now.
So that's really where your inspiration comes from, is through the meditation.
Yes, it is.
So just so that I'm clear on this, when you meditate, and the idea behind meditation is to clear your mind and allow whatever comes in, are you actually able to remember after you've finished meditating, this sort of imagery that came to your mind? Is that what you put down?
I actually sit there with a notebook and a pen, and I write.
So it's an active kind of
It
meditation.
is.
Because I know some people meditate as walking.
Right.
And different things like that. Well, that's very interesting. And you've been meditating for many years?
Quite a few years.
And this process of meditation and writing your poetry, when did that actually begin? When you really realized what was going on and you actively pursued using the meditation as your creative sort of input?
I think it was gradual. It happened that way right from the beginning, but it wasn't until I gave into it. I would kind of lose, not consciousness, but I would literally, my eyes would close. And it started off as an annoyance to me, but it wasn't until I realized that I could go with this and that's where it was coming from that it really took off and became powerful for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, it's beautiful poetry.
Thank you.
I'm very curious about your actual process now. So we know that you meditate and we know that you keep a pad, and that's where you begin. And then what about editing? Do you feel you obviously have to go back and edit them and do some rewrites in that? What is the sort of process to actually begin a poem until you finally said, it's perfect, I'm happy with this, and I'm really ready to publish this now?
Right. I do edit quite a bit.
Do you?
Sometimes, I'll have a lot of times I have longer poems and I end up chopping them up and they become several poems, or I'll take a line and I'll start another poem. And the editing process, sometimes, you get it and it's right and you know it. And sometimes I'll edit poems and I'll look at something years later and say, chop.
Well, that's one thing I'm always curious about when I read poetry.
Yeah.
And you look at the way the stanzas are laid out, you look at the structure of each line, and I often wonder what goes through a poet's mind when they put the poem on paper and they put the sort of breaks, like the punctuation may be in the middle of the next line.
Right.
And it's always interesting to me, what sort of guides you as how you lay out the line of a poem, where it breaks? I mean, is there some sort of insight into that you might have?
I think as I'm writing, I'm kind of reading out loud, and where the natural pauses form, that's kind of where the lines break. So I'm reading it out loud, even if it's in my head as I'm writing the poem, and it tells me kind of where I should break.
It does. Oh, that's fantastic. And you're currently working on some new projects, is that right?
I have quite a bit of new material that I'm thinking book material, but I'd like to do something audio. My next project would be
great.
audio.
Now, when it goes to putting a book like this together, did you need to find an agent, and did you need to get someone to go to a publisher, or is this a self-published book?
This is not. This is with a publisher, Writers Lair Books.
Oh, right.
And it was through a mutual friend that I met maybe 10 years ago, Kwame Alexander, and he was the first person outside of, your family and friends who say, oh, you're such a, your poems are great. He was a stranger, and I met him at the Towson Writers Conference, and he did a kind of a review of a partial manuscript and said, you really need to be published. And
that's wonderful.
Through the process of, keeping in touch with him, he introduced me to my publisher. And
well, this has been so interesting, and I loved hearing you read your poem. That was fabulous, and I hope you all enjoyed it. And for more information about Deanna, if you would like to go to our website, www.ideasinwriting.org, we've created a special page just for Deanna and her poetry. And thank you so much. Thank you for watching Ideas in Writing. We hope you've enjoyed the program. If you're interested in finding out more about how to put your ideas in writing, go to our website at www.ideasinwriting.org. Or if you're an author or someone who works in the publishing industry and you would like to be interviewed on our show, you can contact me at patpatten@ideasinwriting.org. That's PATPATTEN @ideasinwriting.org. Thank you.